Alright, now we're gonna look at the next type of suspension, the 9/8 suspension. Okay? By this time, I'm pretty sure that all of you get the gist of what the suspensions are. Again, preparation, suspension, resolution, the three elements. So, you know, you might ask, well, what does the 9/8 do, or what does it have that the 7/6 or the 4/3 doesn't have? And again, the elements of the suspension have not changed. The baseline, however, determines what kind of suspension we're dealing with here. All right, so the 9/8 suspension involves the 1 going to a 5/6 and then going back to the 1. All right, so or some, not necessarily, I shouldn't say the 1, but a chord going to a chord in first inversion and then back to another chord, because I can have other suspensions, not necessarily between the 1 and the 5 chord. I can have one between 6 and 2 or whatever. All right, but let's not worry about that particular case yet. So I'm just gonna play a basic chord progression. Here is 1. Here it going to the 5/6, and then back to the 1. Okay, that's pretty basic. 1, 5, 6, 1. Now what happens if I want to add a suspension? Well, let's look at measure 13 and 14 and let's find out. Here's measure 13, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, very nice. So we have 1, 5, 6. Again, just like in all the other suspensions that we have discussed thus far. The suspended note is the soprano over here. It doesn't resolve yet. It doesn't move when the actual chord moves. So the 5/6 has moved to the 1 except for one note, this particular soprano. So this note is being suspended. It becomes a suspension and then it finally resolves. All right? So this is, again, preparation or prep. Here's the actual suspension or sus, and here is the resolution or res. Okay, so we have preparation, we have suspension, and we have resolution, and this represents the 9/8 suspension. By the way, why do you think it's called the 9/8? Well, let's look at the interval between the C, which is the bass note, and the note that's being suspended, which is D. Okay, it's a second or a ninth, because a second is that has more than an octave. So if I have an octave plus a second will obviously be this D right here. But this D over here is actually 2 octaves away, well, more than 2 octaves away from the C. So that's why it's called a 9. And then resolving down by step, it's resolving to an octave, so it's 9/8. All right. I know it's a little bit confusing because you might want to ask, well, why is this 9/8 or not like 17/16 or something like that? It's just the name of the suspension. So if you remember that the 9/8 suspension is when you have a compound second, okay, between the bass and the soprano, or the bass and the note that's being suspended, okay, and then resolving down to the actual tonic, that suspension will always be called a 9/8. It's not going to be called 2/1 or 17/16 or anything. It's just going to be called 9/8. All right, very good. Let's look at a couple other things. By the way, suspensions can be featured in all the voices and all 4 parts. It doesn't mean that they only have to be in a soprano. I put them in the soprano so you guys can see them better, but we can have suspension in alto. For example, I can have this D revoiced going into the alto and resolving D to the C, like have this line in the alto and then maybe have a G on top over here, and then the suspension would be the same, it would still be a 7/6. So suspensions don't need to necessarily be in a soprano all the time. All right, they could be in any voices. Even the bass can feature some suspensions. Okay, and these are called bass suspensions. And I will talk to you in the next video.